Hello, so in this video we're going to create a custom fragment and display it in a scroll view. So we're going to go ahead and create an empty project again. We're going to call it whatever, custom fragment sample. So in this one, we're going to wait on Gradle loading it up. And we're going to open our layouts again, just so we can see everyone's there correctly. And our manifest. So in our manifest I'm just going to go in changing just the theme, just so that it does away with the top bar, because I don't always like the top bar. So I'm going to chat dark amber and change no action bar. And that'll just hide that. Give that a wee save, move on. Make sure that's right. Yep, so I'm going to go back to the activity. We're just going to delete that text view and add in a scroll view. So once we've got our scroll view in, dump in a wee linear layer in there just so it puts it together inside, because you need something to scroll inside it. And then let's go ahead and give those IDs. So I'm going to call it container for the linear layout and just scroll view for it. You don't always need to, if you're not going to access it, you don't need to give it an ID. And yeah, we don't have any constraints, so we can go ahead and just add those in. I'm just going to make it to the parent. Click, 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 click it. There we go. And yeah, there's the error, but we can ignore that for this sample. So we're finished in there. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and going to create the fragments in our main code. We're going to create them dynamically in the code. So we'll go ahead. We're going to add a nice empty blank fragment. And we call it item frag. In this case, it's going to add a lot of stuff that we don't need for this sample, but it is handy, but we don't need it for this sample. So I'm just going to go ahead and add it, make sure it's clickable, because we need it to be clickable for a little fragment, and I need it to be focusable. And we're going to set the orientation of it so it's horizontal. And this is the code that generates. Now this is all quite handy, but we don't need it for this sample, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to prune out the stuff we don't really need. So we don't need any private variables because we're going to set some ourselves. We don't need all that. The on create view is fine the way it is, but we're not going to return that one. We're going to change it on. We don't need the companion object because it just gets in the way of the sample. So I'll go ahead and delete those private variables also, and we'll make sure our imports are up for what we need. So we're going to need to also, we're going to be working with a text view, so we'll go ahead and import it. And we're going to be working with one of the toasts, so the little dialogue pop-ups are toasts. So in that, yep, item frag should have a capitalization, so we'll go ahead and correct that. The class, so right, yep. And we're going to go ahead and just add in a little variable to our class, so current ID, and set the default of -1. I'm going to comment out that term because we're not going to use that one. We're going to set a new view variable. We're going to access inflator and inflator layout, so we can access, that's the fragment item frag and the container and false, and that just lets us access the items on our view or our fragment in the code. So find view by ID, r.id. Now we've not actually set any in the XML, so we're just going to leave that and set it as a to do and come back to it. And we're going to, once we actually know which text view we're setting it to, we're going to print out menu item, this, the current ID, and set it to string because it's an integer. Now, obviously right now it doesn't do anything, but that's the past data we're going to pass to our fragment on creation. And then we're going to set an on-click listener for our little fragment, so do stuff when it's clicked. In this case I'm just going to print a toast out, so toast.makeText, the context, which is this program, and the text we want to display. You click the menu ID and whatever the current ID variable is set to currently. And we'll set it to a short length display and make sure it shows. There we go. And you could do anything here. You could have it open a new window, a new activity, sending data elsewhere. It's up to you. And we're going to return that view back so that it creates our fragment. And here we need to update our name because we changed the capitalization, so go ahead and it doesn't tab complete for some reason, but it is item frag with capitalization, and that does work. So there is a text view in there, but it's no use to us as a frame layout. We're going to need a bit more control over it, so I'm going to drop into the code. I'm going to resize it to roughly the size what we want our fragment to be. Now obviously it changes sometimes. We've got a text view, we've got an image view in here, but it is still a frame layout. So let's fix that. In our layout we're going to put constrained layout. Yep. And then we're going to add our image and constrain it to the window again, as always. Our Android Studio will just complain about constraints. We're going to put a couple of text views on there so we can write stuff to it. Constrain it to the other things on the window. And you spend so much time messing about with constraints in Android Studio, or it feels like that anyway. It does make sense when you're actually working with different sizes of screens, but when initially learning it's quite frustrating. So I'll go ahead. I'm going to add a button so we can have a button on our fragment. Still an error down there on the text view. I'll just constrain it to the bottom. Fix it back up. There we go. And for that, we now have our ID of text view 2, and that's it. We can now run our program. The toast is open, so every time it creates a new fragment, it creates an on-click. Yep. Let's go ahead and add an on-click to the button. So put in the button in, find value ID and the button. It doesn't have. It will know what instance of the button it is because you're setting an on-click listener for that button. So button set on-click listener, and this could be again doing anything. It could be right now just logging it to the debug log under the tag button and button pressed on whatever fragment it is. So use the current ID again. Need to import a log. The button could be adding things to carts, anything. It's up to you. In this sample we're just going to do it. So, and back in the main activity we're actually going to create the fragments. So variable type fragment, name fragment, and then of the actual type of the class item frag. So it's a new fragment. Set data. Now I forgot to create the set data function, but we'll go back and fix it. So set data to 1, that means we're passing what an ID through. Could be anything, we can pass anything or any object to it. It's up to us because we're writing it. Support fragment manager, begin the transaction. We're adding a new fragment to the container, which is our scroll view, our linear layout inside the scroll view, and then we're going to commit it. So that creates the fragment in the code. I'm just going to go back and put the set data in. But yeah, that creates the fragment in code and assigns it to it and then commits it, adds it to the container and commits it, so it actually refreshes on the screen. So we can add them dynamically anytime we want. Now this could come, I've put it in code right now, but that could be loaded from anywhere. You could be loading it from a database, you could be loading it for a JSON call, you could be loading it for a website. It's up to you. I've just written it in code now. It's completely down to where you're calling these. So it could be coming from a loop, coming from a file. So we'll go ahead and we'll run it. and we'll make sure it's actually doing something. We can see it, but it's tiny there, so let's just resize that emulator. We'll go ahead and click Scrollview. You've seen it down the toast down the bottom. It's changing, and the buttons are going into the dialog box at the back. You'll see it, button pressed on fragment, and then toasts. Yeah, I was going to add a barrier and change the colour, but it never quite works out right. But it's fine. We'll run it anyway. You can mess about with the colours yourself, but that would, if the image was there, the text would be in a better place and everything. But there we go.